2 years ago today, on the 29th of July 2022, something magnificent and beautiful was locked away. My name's Ruth Rogers, but for 8 years of my life I was Ruth from The Canvas. A tiny cafe with a huge heart, The Canvas was a thriving social enterprise just off Brick Lane in East London, a creative community space with a real and deep commitment to positive change. We were a refuge and resource for the homeless and our neighbours in need, a sanctuary for the lonely and lost. We hosted events that included improv nights and support groups for mental health, providing a space for people to grow positive projects that are still creating ripples of happiness and hope across the world today. This was a space built with hard graft and love, with the help of friends, family and community, on my single belief that humans are amazing. They just need space to be so. But 2 years ago, that space was taken away from not just me, but from all of those people. 2 years on, I'm ready to tell the story of The Canvas and invite you all on a journey with me. A journey that will celebrate the people and projects that exist today because of The Canvas, as well as people like me who are trying to reimagine communities or systems or entire worlds. I want to explore how we might connect and unite more spaces to exist as The Canvas did, as beacons of hope and spaces for change. So, launching 2 years since the first chapter ended, this is the start of the next one. This is me, Ruth from The Canvas, opening up a different kind of space, and everyone is welcome. You're about to listen to a conversation between me and the wonderful Emma Ashrew-Jones. Please note it's recorded on my living room sofa. It felt important to me that the story was shared in a space that felt comfortable and familiar to me. But it means that some sections do sound quiet. Just like in life, not every bit is perfect. But come and join Emma and I on my sofa to hear a story that's waited 2 years to be told.
Hi Ruth, good morning.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
This is felt in my mind for a long time, a really important conversation. I'm incredibly grateful to be having it with you. Sat on the sofa that I have grieved and sort of thought so much about what I'm going to be talking about today.
Thank you so much for having me here on the sofa, and I feel so privileged to be about to have this conversation with you. So for anyone listening who might not know me, my name is Emma Ashrew-Jones, and we met through an organisation that I've been part of, the New Citizen Project. Their belief is all around involving people as citizens and not selling to them as consumers. That real belief in people is, I think, what brought us together and is a huge part of the driving force that we're talking about today. So thank you so much for having me. Yeah, I know elements of this story. Who's listening will know elements of the practical story, what's happened with The Canvas over the past 10 years. But today is the first time we're sitting down to fully share that story in all its depth. So, how is it feeling to just be doing this?
I had a lot of really vivid dreams about The Canvas last night, and I don't think The Canvas was my first baby. I've since had 2 human ones, but it was my first baby, and I don't think I fully grieved the fact that it isn't here anymore. And I think a lot of that is because when it all happened, which we'll obviously go into, but when it all happened, I very much quite quickly moved into, well, we need to bring it back. And while that journey is ongoing, I think there's a really important step in actually going, do you know what existed and what was so magnificent and what was so vital for so many people for 8 years? It was forced to close, and that was 2 years ago on the day that we're launching this conversation. So I think I've purposefully held back a lot. So forgive me for Emma sat in front of me, and for anyone listening, welcome to the therapy session that is this conversation, because I don't think I've fully really grieved what happened 2 years ago.
All so welcome. So welcome. And welcome. Thank you for mentioning that. Welcome to everybody listening. It's a very exciting journey that you're on now, beginning the Canvas podcast. And so welcome to anyone who's joining. Ruth, in meeting you, in spending time with you and connecting with you, I am so struck by this vibrant, tenacious, fierce belief that you have in the goodness of people. It just absolutely radiates through you, and I've been so struck by it in being in your presence, and I wonder where that comes from for you. Has that always been there? Is that just part of who you are?
I think it must be, because for in thinking of where it might have come from, obviously I'm really lucky. I had a really happy, warm childhood. My mum, my dad, and my big sister, and lots of pets. But really, in terms of any defining moment, no, I think I just fundamentally believe in the humanity of humans, in the amazingness of humans, and I'm also lucky enough to have that belief reflected back and confirmed, like, every single day. The way that a stranger reacts if you're in need, a way that you might have a connection with someone on a train. I was once on a train on my way back from a thing in London. I'd been with my uni mates, and I sat down. The only space to sit was next to this woman, and she was crying. And I knew she was crying. She knew that I knew she was crying, and her bag was like really it was a huge bag, and so I sort of perched. I was like, I'm really sorry. Over the course of our train conversation, we started small with some small talk, and by the time I got off my line, we hugged each other, and we were both in tears because of the connection that we had shared, and the fact that she had felt like she told me a bit about why she was crying. It was about a guy. It's always about a guy. But she was a fantastic young woman, and that's just one example of so many examples around just. I think too often people, whether we're told to see this or whether there's sort of fear that is being fed us. I don't know, but I find that so often people assume that, well, the people over there, they're different, or we're over here, they're over there, we have nothing in common. We have all got so much in common. And it doesn't take much to scratch beneath the surface. Like, you scratch a little bit beneath the surface of any human and you find beauty and humanity.
So there was a story you told me about.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So this is often the story I use when people when I'm talking about the origins of the canvas. There's a big one that I'm sure we'll go into about a sofa. But this one is that when I was sort of having the ideas around the canvas, I used to live in Hackney, and I had this little front garden, and it was a bit of a joke because I used to weed it, but it was a scrubby bit of front garden, and I was weeding away. And I saw this bloke walking up with his dog, and his dog was one of those like bull terriers, massive studded collar, with the spikes and everything. And he had a metal chain for his lead. And I would say when I first saw them, I thought, oh gosh, like, they're not going to want to talk to me. And the dog's owner was sort of equally looking quite unapproachable. And as the dog drew next to me, I just went, hello. And this dog just went, hello, and like jumped up, started wagging his tail, slobbering, and I started giving him a cuddle and scratching his head, and the owner started to laugh, and we shared this lovely moment. And I thought, wow, that was me guilty of it right there. I totally kind of cast these two characters as unapproachable, unfriendly, and yet it just took one hello, and both of those characters were warm and friendly, and we shared a really lovely moment. So yeah, I believe in humans, and I would urge anyone listening, just go out and say hi to some dogs and chat to people on trains, because there's not enough of that going on.
So true. I love that, and I love these stories of human connection that you're sharing. There are so many incredible stories of human connection that came through your tempers. So I would love for you to take us back, Ruth, to the very beginning of this incredible journey that you've been on. Where did the idea for the canvas come from?
Well, I guess it would help to maybe, for those who don't know it, the canvas was a cafe, but it was also so much more than a cafe. Yes. It was just off Brick Lane in East London, which is in a borough called Tower Hamlets, which is one of the most disadvantaged boroughs in the whole of London. And yet the idea for it came earlier than when I opened it, obviously. I mean, that's get the idea before you do something, but quite a lot earlier. The main concept around the canvas, and the reason it was called the canvas initially, was because every wall on the canvas had a question on it. And the questions were designed to invite people to share things about themselves. So stories and opinions and secrets and memories. So questions like, what's your happy place? Tell us a book you couldn't put down. Tell us about your grandparents. And that's one of my favourite questions because it's just so rich. And another one was, what childhood recipe brings back memories of being young? And when customers came in, we gave them a pen and they were invited to share their thoughts and they would answer the questions on the walls. And what that did...
Such good questions.
Well, now you see, my aim with those questions was that my dad and my boyfriend at the time, now husband, had to feel comfortable answering them. You couldn't have anything that was like too deep because I didn't want this place to feel kind of inaccessible and like you have to share your deepest, darkest secrets. Like one of the questions was, what's your celebrity crush? Brilliant. Secret celebrity crush. Mine was Alan Rickman. But
good choice.
So gorgeous. The whole point of it was that people were invited to share bits of themselves.
Yeah.
And I'm going to pause there because I'm remembering your actual question, which is where did it start? I'm about to get overexcited and tell you all about how that went.
I love it.
But the reason that I did that was actually because before I knew about, before the canvas was an idea in my head, I was running a positive body image movement called Body Gossip, which is something I set up I had the idea when I was studying film acting in New York. I was 25 and I had this idea that at the time there was so much media body shaming going on and size zero was a real thing. And I thought, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could celebrate and empower real people's stories about their bodies? People saying like, this is what it's like having my body. And I got famous actors to perform them in live theatre shows and in short films on YouTube. And, a story that someone wrote on their bed in Liverpool, for example, would then be viewed by hundreds of thousands of people and inspired them and reassured them and supported them through eating disorders and body dysmorphia. And it was really helpful. And so it was that kind of one person story really helping many people. But in order to get that off the ground, I took me and my living room sofa, those IKEA clip-on sofas, where you took you can take the cover off. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd give my sofa a brand new white cover and I'd take it off to somewhere where I know I'd get lots of passers-by. So I took it to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival, to Close Show Live, to schools, colleges, high streets, and I invited people to write one sentence about their body on the sofa. Now, little did I know that this was then going to be the idea for a cafe in East London, but when you invite people to write on an unusual canvas, they are more brave, more articulate, more poetic, more beautiful than they would be if you just asked them to share their thoughts in real life. I saw that in reality anyway. And, you'd have partners come up to you and say, hey, I've just seen what my partner's written on your sofa and I didn't know they felt that way about their body and I love that bit about them. I'm going to go and chat to them about it. Or mothers, this was a really big one, mothers coming up to me and saying, thank you so much. I've seen what my daughter's written on your sofa and now I can talk to her about that. But there was one really memorable occasion where I was at the Vitality show and these two women came up and one of them wrote fingers crossed on the sofa and her mate, I'll never forget this, her mate turned to her and said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I was going to tell you later, but I'm pregnant. And it turned out that she'd had a series of miscarriages and this was the one she felt that she could actually tell her mate about, but she told the sofa first. And I thought, wow, there's something really amazing about this. Yeah. You give an unusual canvas, like a sofa, And people are more honest and real.
Why do you think that is?
I'd love to give you a really intellectual and studied answer, but I don't know.
Yeah.
What I saw, though, is that when I then had the idea to create the canvas and I saw it happening in real life, people would walk into my cafe and you'd see them. They'd walk in thinking they were walking into a cafe off Brick Lane.
Yeah.
And then they'd go, oh, ooh, and they'd look around and they'd go, oh, can I? And we'd go, yeah, you can. So I think there's something around ownership.
Yeah.
Around you saying, this is our space, as in yours and ours. It's ours, it's yours. Come and be part of this space. Leave your mark. And that leaving of their mark would then, they'd come back and they'd bring their mates and they'd say, look, I wrote that. And then they'd watch the evolution of their comment because people would be like, I think that too. This is my, I also fancy Alan Rickman. And so you've seen, it was like a really warm, supportive toilet door. And also people would get incredibly passionate. And so sometimes we'd have to paint over the walls. So we'd photograph them, then we'd paint over them and people would go, oh, you've painted, like, we're so sorry. The space was theirs.
Yeah.
And then what that did for the next iteration of the activities we created at the campus was we always started with that level of ownership, that this is your space just as much as it is ours. And I believe that it breaks down all imagined barriers between people, because it doesn't matter. Everyone has a happy place. Everyone has a memory from their childhood around food. Everyone has grandparents. So I believe that if you've even if you don't write on the wall, if you're then reading it, I believe you will walk out of that cafe with a greater respect and love for your fellow humans. And I think you will feel less us and them and more we're all
so powerful. It makes me think of that idea of there being kind of universality in the specific, that you hear someone's very specific story about their grandparents or you read it on the wall, and even though it's different to yours, there's a sense of, oh, I feel that way too. And just that beauty of connection. And I love what you said about the sense of permission. What else can I? Yeah. And then what that went on to do. So, okay, so I'm picturing the cafe, I'm picturing these walls. What else was happening? What did the canvas go on to be?
I guess the practical thing I should point out is that I had no experience in cafe ownership whatsoever when I opened this space. I just had this fundamental belief that wouldn't it be amazing to kind of take the sofa and turn it into a physical space? But you have to have a reason for people to come in, and that's a cafe. Cafes are incredibly difficult things to run, like rock hard. And I had no experience in running them. So when my cafe opened, the concept of writing on the walls was ongoing. And if you'd have found me in any of those sort of days in the first year or 2 years, I would have been scrabbling around trying to work out the price of avocado on toast, trying to, make the staff rota work, trying to, create cleaning rotas. Like that's what having
all for the first time.
So
wild.
Yeah, but we had the space that we leased, which was 42 Hanbury Street, just off Brick Lane. It had 2 other spaces. And so I also knew that I wanted to do things in those spaces that where humans could come in and create and connect. And it almost was happening I was about to say it was happening by chance, but I believe that the atmosphere that the questions on the walls set meant that people would walk in and feel differently about themselves and the space and their fellow humans in that space. So we just started to say, look, we have space, come and use it. And while I was doing the staff rota and learning how to be a cafe manager, what was happening is that people were coming in and saying, can I run an event? Can I run an event? Can I run an event? And so over time, we started to become just this space where things were happening. And the first one to happen was something called Happy Hour, which was a mental health supportive comedy night. it was run by an amazing comedian called Juliet Burton, and she would gather comedians from all across the country to come and do these nights where the whole point of them was it was a supportive environment. No one would be singled out or made to feel rubbish. And that was the first thing we started to do. The Museum of Happiness, which was, they had been doing pop-ups in Spitalfields Market. I noticed that they started having their meetings there. They started like choosing us as their like cafe to meet, to have a coffee and talk about next steps. So we started talking to them, and they said, well, we actually need a space. So I said, well, why don't you come and use our space? We started to become the London space to meet for an awful lot of organisations. The Happy Startup School started to run their London meetups from us, out of our space. Action for Happiness started to launch their Happiness Habits course in our space, and we just sort of, we were like a magnet for change makers and positivity pioneers. It was, and it all sounds very vague because it was all happening around me. I wasn't driving any of it, and I think that's a really important point to make. I didn't drive any of this. I just opened up a space. I set some rules around come and write on our walls, and humans did the rest. And so, yeah, we became London's first happy cafe. So Action for Happiness have a movement of cafes. We were London's first ever happy cafe. And, you know, just before the pandemic hit, we'd been open for 5 years. We had, on average, 60 events every month. Wow. So that's every day. Yeah. There was at least one thing, but because we had 2 spaces, we would often have a free meditation on a Friday night. Someone just wanted to give free meditation or free mindfulness classes on a Friday because they thought that after a stressed week, people would need to sort of, you know, get their heads clear. We'd have a comedy night happening down in the basement, and we'd have the cafe full of people. I used to sort of try and meet someone, you know, come and, you know, if someone interviewing for a job or whatever, I'd have to leave the cafe to go and find a seat because there were things happening in all spaces across our 3 areas. So yeah,
so brilliant. And such diversity of things happening as well.
So the 2 spaces, they sort of had quite clear criteria. We had we called it the back room was our community hub, and that was, I used to call that soil. I was like, this is soil for the growth and the launch and growth of new ideas that will improve people's lives in some way, and they have to be free for the public to access. Yeah. So someone would come to me and say, look, I'm a yoga teacher. I really want to give a free yoga class once a week to local people in the area. So they'd come on a Saturday morning and set up. That was perfect for the community hub. And then downstairs we had what we called our creative space. So that would host larger scale meetups. So film screenings, book launches, the Happy newspaper launched at the canvas in that space. We had inspirational speakers, comedy, like I said, live music. One of our staff members, Martha, ran a monthly jazz night there, just to create a platform for people, for young musicians to come and play. And we had these 2 spaces, and across them we had free ukulele classes for feminists.
Excellent.
We had a support group for male identity.
Wow.
So men coming together and just talking about what being a man felt like for them. Lots of peer support groups in the community hub. So Rain on Me, which is still going, created by a fantastic woman called Dipanshi. She created that in the community hub. That's a young people's peer mental health support group. So yeah, it was just being used all the time.
As it should be. And you know, what I really hear there is just such a sense of welcome that you created, a sense that people were welcome and that the space was really safe to do quite deep work as well as really light, joyful things. And it makes me think there just aren't spaces like that exist, right? Which is why it was such a magnet for so many of these amazing projects.
Yeah, that's brought up 2 stories that I'd love to share. The first one was that there's still a restaurant in London called, now I'm going to have to be very embarrassing and say I don't remember their West London name, but Fat Macy's.
Yeah.
Fat Macy's is a restaurant concept where they train and employ young people who are at risk of homelessness or who are homeless, and they set up a pop-up at the Canvas. Their first ever trial of the concept was at the Canvas, and Meg, who's the founder of that, she emailed me and said, "What do you think? Like, can we come and do it?" And my response was, "Yes, of course. Like, this sounds amazing." And Meg said to me, "Everyone else has said no. When you mention, oh, we'll be bringing young homeless people into your space, other restaurants have gone, oh, no, that's not for us." Whereas she said, "You were like really up for it." I said, "Yeah, of course. This is exactly the kind of thing that we want to be supporting at the Canvas." And she was like, "Wow, that's just so opposite from every other space that we've come across." And Fat Macy's then went off to having their own London restaurants. They are an incredible.
I've eaten their food; it's absolutely delicious.
It's so good, and the concept's wonderful. The whole thing, and yeah, they started at the Canvas.
When you said, just doing things in a completely opposite way, it makes me think of the Pay It Forward board. Sorry, remind me what it was called. The board.
Yeah, the Pay It Forward board.
Yes.
So we set up a Pay It Forward board, which actually, it's like, so Suspended Coffees is an American concept, and there are Pay It Forward boards all around London, really. So it's not a new concept. But a lot of Pay It Forward boards, from what I understand, it's very much more of a takeaway offer. Whereas the way that our cafe was, that you very much had to come into the space to get your coffee, and we created an environment where paying for customers and pay it forward customers were really comfortably existing together. So our Pay It Forward board customers were maybe a dozen to 20 regular homeless men and women who were sleeping on and around Brick Lane, and they would use us every day for a cup of coffee and a cake or some hot food, and it was paid for by the customers. And what I loved most about the Pay It Forward board was, well, I loved our community of homeless people, because you would see just so clearly the direct impact that the generosity of our customers was having. They would pay back as well. So I remember one day when Rob, one of our Pay It Forward customers, came in with this garden table, and he brought it in and he went, I've found this and I'd love to give it to your garden so that your customers can sit around it. And he wrote on it, to everyone who's paid it forward, "Thank you, I'm paying it back." And we had that table in the garden. But I also loved how our customers responded to the Pay It Forward board. I'll never forget, I was on the till, and a man came in and asked if there was anything on the board, and I said, "No, I'm really sorry, there's nothing." And this customer, she sort of stood up, like, "I'll do it," and called across the cafe and came and bought this guy a
because
coffee.
People want to.
Yeah. I think there's something really authentic and transparent about going, well, I can give here and I know exactly how it's going to be helping someone.
So tangible.
Yeah. I once sat outside my cafe next to one of our regular homeless customers, and I said to him, how are you? And he said, "Well, I feel like a human being, actually, because and I'm not taking anything away from the incredible work that shelters are doing, providing, multiple meals every day. But this guy," he said, "this is a really good coffee, and it's a really good cake, and I get to come into your cafe and be treated like a human." They charge their phone for them. They could sit, and one guy would use our Wi-Fi to talk to his daughter in Australia. And we just welcomed them because they were humans.
So this incredible community has been created that is so much more than a cafe. What I'm really hearing is the cafe was a huge part of it and was the vehicle, was the facilitator almost, but it became so much more than that. And then 2 years ago to the day that this is going live.
Yeah, but I guess we need to start the story really in 2020 when COVID came along.
Yeah,
because obviously we were asked to close. And I need to be really clear here that I didn't know what I was doing when I set up the business. I was really learning on the job, and I found it incredibly difficult to make the finances of running the cafe and all the social work we were doing around it really work and break even, basically. I think the standard that I hear a lot of cafe owners say is it takes 5 years to get a cafe to break even. So we were actually going to do that we'd been open for 5 years when the pandemic hit. And we had just launched this incredible project with Gilbert and George, who are world famous artists, and they lived just around the corner from us. And they gifted original artwork that we were printing on plates, dinner plates, and we were selling those plates. And the proceeds of those plates were then going to our kitchen to make homemade food that we'd send out into our community. So I think each plate would fund 14 hot meals to go out into the community, and we would send them to schools and churches and housing associations and shelters.
And this was all happening through the pandemic.
So this had just launched. I think it was December. It was just for Christmas, just 2019.
Wow.
I was heavily pregnant with my daughter. So yeah, Christmas 2019, we just launched this. It was called Double Helpings.
And you could never have known how needed that would be.
No, exactly. So we got...
Sorry, I'm jumping ahead.
No. Good jump.
Yeah.
So that had just launched, and then the pandemic hit. And so what we did over the pandemic is we had to close to the public, but we stayed open, and we would send these meals out. So I would have my staff would come in, my cooks would come in and make these meals, and then we'd send them out. We'd also open for a food bank. So we would open, we connected with Fair Share, who are a charity who gather surplus fresh food and any tinned goods. And we would open up to be a food bank. And we really noticed that the area desperately needed that. And the area of Brick Lane, there are families living there who they're incredibly proud, and they wouldn't necessarily sort of want you to know that they needed to get a bag of free food.
Sure.
Like proudly stand in a queue, they pick up what they need and then they go. But we would see the queue round the corner onto Brick Lane itself, mums and grandmas, queuing up to get this free food. Yeah. And what I was able to do is, my staff were furloughed, but I would bring people back in to run the food bank and also to run the free meals. And that's how we sort of did the pandemic. We also did some crucial work to the space. When I leased the space, it was really run down. And I had like really tiny budgets to set the cafe up. This was in 2014. So I always felt like I'd kind of painted over the problems. But the space was really quite sort of dilapidated in areas. And I felt that we weren't being able to sort of hold the projects that were trying to launch in us very effectively, because we were always like, the electric's blown, or it was always a bit, we were always apologising for the space. So we also got a bit of, we had a crowdfunder to raise some money to try and do up the space. So that's what we were doing over the pandemic. I also had a newborn. My daughter Nell was born in 2020 in January, not March. Then the pandemic started in March. And I also had my son Jim, who was 18 months old. So that was all happening over the pandemic. When the pandemic started and we had to close, it is joining us.
Everyone's welcome.
Yeah, probably. I wrote to our landlord, who are a huge housing association, and they have hundreds of residential properties, and they have a handful of commercial properties. I wrote to them and said, look, I don't know what's going on with rent over this lockdown, but I've cancelled the direct debit because I can't pay rent. So I'm going to be you let me know. You let me know what you're going to do. And for a 2-year period, I never once heard from that landlord about what to do about COVID rental arrears.
Okay.
So I was emailing them, and when I wasn't receiving a response, I was phoning them. When I wasn't receiving a response, I would turn up to their offices. But they're in one of those like really big high-rise offices on Canary Wharf. So you turn up and you actually get a reception desk that's like the reception desk for the whole thousands and thousands of offices. I never managed to get a response, so I just thought, oh, okay, we're clearly really low down on their priority list.
Right.
And when we were allowed to open again, which was July 21, is that right? I think we reopened July 21. And then there was another little lockdown, wasn't there? There was like another closure. Omicron came along. That was it. We were promised in July that the summer everything reopened again. We all thought that people would like rush back to physical spaces again, but Omicron stopped that, and everyone stayed away. And there were no one was working in the offices around Brick Lane, and no one was visiting Brick Lane because there was no tourism. And so we had barely any customers, and the need for our pay it forward board and our food bank had trebled.
Yeah.
So we were trying to keep up with providing for the people who needed, but actually the revenue we were getting in was horrifically frightening. So in March 2022, I remember thinking, I can't make this work. And I actually rang my dear friend, Ray, who set up the Double Helpings campaign with me, and I said, look, we can't make this work. I'm going to have to close the canvas. And she said, no, you're not. No, I refuse for the canvas to be a victim of the pandemic. No, we're going to sort this out. And her and her business partner, Dan, they set up a crowdfunder called the Save Our Seats campaign. And the whole point was like, come on, save this fantastic space. Don't let it become a victim of the pandemic. And we, the message was, we need to ride this out. The need has trebled, but sales are halved. We just can't make this work. And that crowdfunder, at the beginning of a cost of living crisis, raised £80,000.
Wow.
Meanwhile, we had also been offered an incredibly reasonable rent at the cafe of a yoga studio in Sydenham. And I was like, yeah, this could work, because if people aren't in Shoreditch, which is, so for anyone who doesn't know London, Shoreditch is like the area that Brick Lane is in, and if they're not there, they're working at home. So if I've also got a residential cafe, maybe we can kind of like find customers in residential areas while we're also rebuilding the working space of Shoreditch, getting those customers back. So we had two spaces, and with the huge boost of the crowdfunder, I had like restructured the staff so that we had like managers that would sit across both spaces. The Shoreditch space was like catering infrastructure for the Sydenham space because there wasn't a kitchen there. And on the beginning of August 2022, I had said to my team, I'm going to take a sabbatical to enable you all to step up into your roles. And I'll come back and you tell me where you need me. And everything felt so good.
Yeah.
I'd sent a chunk of rent to the landlord. We paid off. We had some invoices who were being very patient, but you don't launch a crowdfunder because you've got everything paid up to date. You launch a crowdfunder like that because actually you're like, oh my gosh, there are people who've been very patient, but I need to pay them. So we had we settled a whole load of stuff, and we were looking really, really ready.
Was this the first time that you sort of allowed yourself to take a breather, pause with the sabbatical as well?
The plan was to take a sabbatical.
Yeah. Okay.
On the 1st of August. And I remember saying to people, like, I am crawling towards that sabbatical. But the rest of the team were like, they were on the starting blocks.
Yeah.
And they were like, we're in our new roles. We know exactly what to do. We just had the backing of our entire community. We've raised 80 grand at the beginning of a cost of living crisis. And then on the 29th of July 2022, I had a photograph sent to me from my chef, and it was of a lock on our shutter. And our landlord, with no warning, no communication at all, had locked us out and forfeited our lease, and everything stopped. Everything. I couldn't do anything. There was a very brief moment where they were going to consider a payment plan. Because the strange thing was, having had no response from them, I wrote to them that day and I said, why have you done this? I never said I wasn't going to pay the COVID rent, the rental arrears. I've been trying to set up a payment plan with you for 2 years. Why did you lock us out? Why couldn't you have contacted me? It's like they were the opposite of me. They didn't treat me like a human at all. They just locked us out. And they said, oh yeah, come in and talk to us and we'll talk about payment plan. And there was, if any of you are listening, followed our Instagram at that time, you've probably seen a video of me in my car outside a supermarket because I was paralysed because having had that meeting, I then sent across this like plan for a payment plan because I just needed the keys. Because if I could have got the keys, I could have got things going again. And we had the staff. I said to them, I'm paying you for the shifts that you were rotated to do because I didn't, first of all, they were the most amazing team of people and I didn't want them to be let down. So I said, I will honour the wages that you are going to have for when we're closed, but I also needed them to be on standby because I was like, we're going to get the keys back. And when we get the keys back, off we go. Like, we get back up and running. And yeah, we would have lost a few days, but I genuinely thought we'd get the keys back. And then they got this payment plan and they were communicating with me. Like, oh yeah, we've got it. And then they stopped again. They stopped communicating. And there were days where I would ring them and they wouldn't I couldn't get through the reception desk again. And I just went back to being completely blocked by them. And there was a point a couple of weeks in that I had to say, okay, then Hanbury Street is done. We're done. And all of that amazing positivity and hope, we were never able to get back into that. So, and then I had to close Sydenham because I'd lost my infrastructure. We couldn't make anything. And I was going to keep it going. And I had this plan for like pouring all my energy into Sydenham. But my mother-in-law and her partner and my husband sat me down actually in that room next door to where we're having this chat. And they sat me down and they said, we won't let you. Sorry, wow. We won't let you. You keep pushing all your energy. They said, we love you and we love the canvas. And we actually think that you need to stop and rest because they said, if the canvas is going to come back, then you need to rest. And you can't rest if one of your babies is still going. So you have to close it down. So then I had to have the awful thing of going into Sydenham and 6 months of that beautiful space, which it was stunning, and all the goodwill that we had started to create there and generate there. I had to close that down. And that was September 2022 when it all completely ended.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Ruth. See how much it brings up for you to relive that time. And I feel it with you as you're sharing this. To be able to talk about that period.
Well, I felt massive shame and failure and I really felt a huge sense that it was my fault. And I don't think I've really sort of got rid of that. So to talk about it now, it feels very cathartic because I don't think I really dealt with it at the time. I had a 3 and a 4-year-old and I had a staff team and I had to think about them, and we then had to put the business into insolvency because we couldn't trade. So therefore the debt we did owe the landlord, I could never have paid it back. It was more than the money we had left over from the crowdfunder. So I couldn't pay them back. Therefore we were insolvent. So that it kind of kick-started into all of these logistical things, and you just sort of move into logic. For anyone listening who's lost a business, especially after the pandemic, you might, maybe they're kind of empathizing with that feeling of you just got to keep going because life and all of that. So this does feel like the first time I've kind of shared it, and I feel huge shame, and I want to say sorry to everyone who gave money to us, because there are people who I live in the village. I live in a little village, and there are people who've given money to that crowdfunder, and every time I see them, I still want to say, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry that your money didn't go to do what it was supposed to do. I feel massive shame. And I don't feel like I have. It's really funny. I've got friends who say to me, "Oh, you achieved so much with the canvas," and I say, "No, I didn't. I didn't because we couldn't keep open. We didn't manage to keep going. So all those people who used us every day, where are they now? Where what's opened in that space isn't a community cafe. So where
really hear that feels like there's strange to be there, and I really just want to acknowledge, if it's okay, the enormous systemic barriers that you face. This was so beyond the power of any individual, and the way that you were treated, as you said, was trying so hard to make those senses that it's because of devoted work and still to those people. So that's why it's so.
Thank you, Emma. I did a lot of wintering after it closed down.
And do you talk about, for anyone who doesn't know wintering? I love Catherine May's work as well. What does wintering mean?
Wintering means no matter what type of season, which I was lucky because I started wintering in autumn and then I was able to winter in winter. But it's about when you feel that you're in seasons, in our own seasons of spring and summer, we are developing, we are proactive. And actually, if you choose to winter, you purposefully hunker down and you preserve your energy, and you sleep, and you bake or you walk, and you do things that you're kind of consciously choosing to generate with it. Regenerate. Regenerate's not maybe the right idea, but it's a bit like hibernating, or like a bulb that's under the soil. And I said to myself, I wintered for the winter of 22, moving into 23. And then I said to myself, I have to come out in some way in the spring in 2022. 23. I need to stop wintering. So I gave myself that deadline, which is probably why I didn't really fully breathe, because it's not very long. But I knew that I wanted to explore what the canvas might be again.
It makes me think, to kind of continue the soil metaphor from before, it makes me think about this idea of compost and something kind of dying and going to ground, but being the fertile ground from which something can grow, actually.
Yes.
So perhaps that brings us on, it's right to you, start to talk about where that is taking you, because this is not the end of the journey, is it?
No, it isn't. Thank goodness. So, I couldn't shake the fact that, however painful it felt to think about the canvas, actually, thinking about the canvas felt really painful. But I knew that it hadn't fulfilled its potential. We were about to. It felt like we were just about to fulfill our potential, but we didn't. And I knew that as I moved into that sort of spring of 23, I wanted to start talking to people who the canvas had meant something to, but I also wanted to meet people who I hadn't met before, but who were sort of in the world of. This is around the time I read John Alexander's book, Citizens. I knew I wanted to start exploring what the canvas had meant. If you took the canvas and went, okay, for 8 years, this space did this, what does that mean in the wider story of all of this? Because there is so much going on in the world at the moment around people power, community building. I think a lot of people are dissatisfied with the systems around us, and we're trying to upgrade them. We're trying to create more people-powered ones. Citizenship is all around moving out of the consumer story into the citizen one, and not being pulled back into the subject story, which we all existed in pre-consumerism. So I was interested, and I think I knew that on a personal level if I was knocking on doors to try and meet new people, I was coming with a more exciting story of, I'm wondering if I rebuild my business rather than I'm a failed business owner. I'm just trying to work out my next steps. I knew that bringing the canvas on board with me was the right thing to do. And I remember talking about the canvas as if they were like a child who I knew was absolutely wonderful and had done really magnificent things. And I just wanted to explore the best next steps for them. It's almost, and I would say to people, I don't even know if I'm the right person to move this wonderful thing on. It's almost like if someone wanted to give the canvas a scholarship to go off and like study abroad, I would have gone, do it. Yeah. You just need to fulfill your potential, the canvas. And if that's with me, great. But if not, I am humbly willing to wish you well. And I just knew that I'd built something remarkable. And that was not the end of it. So that led me to have lots of chats online and in person with some really interesting people. And the message kept coming back, which was, this is an incredible concept. John Alexander himself said there should be a canvas in every neighbourhood. And if there were a canvas in every neighbourhood, it could be one of the things that is a catalyst for a citizen shift. If you've got this concept of a physical space, encouraging but also expecting people to behave like citizens, proactive citizens of the world, trusting people who do put their hand up to pay for a coffee for someone in need, who will donate their Saturday morning to teach yoga, who will come and volunteer to run a food bank. So I felt that this idea of a canvas in every neighbourhood was one that I wanted to explore. But I also felt very strongly that I didn't want to own 100 leases or 100 staff rotas, or I don't want to be on the WhatsApp group of 100 cafes when the coffee machine breaks down. Or, I just knew that that's not, especially right now, I've got a 4 and a 6-year-old, and I just thought, no, I don't want that for myself. Yeah. I also think my husband would walk out.
Important.
I want to keep him around. He's lovely. Anyway, so I was like, well, okay, canvas in every neighbourhood and I don't want that in my life. So what do I do? So then I had this realisation. This was last summer, summer of 2023. I went, well, there are cafes in every neighbourhood. So what would it look like to connect and unite existing cafes and support them to add on the elements that I believe made the canvas much more than a canvas? Now, I don't know whether that means they all have to start writing on the walls. I don't know. But what I do know is there are 3 things that the canvas did that meant we were such a vital community asset. And they were a pay it forward board, a food bank, and free community events. And as you remember, as I said, I set those things up, but the rest were done by the humans who used the space. Yeah. The vibe and the atmosphere, and that was humans being amazing. A little like tagline for the canvas is, we believe humans are amazing, they just need space to be so, and the canvas provides that space. But what if the cafe on your high street, the independent cafe on your street, provided those things? I bet the magic would then be created by the humans who used it. So I'm really interested in what might happen if you connect a network of existing cafes and you supported them to add on these elements. I have a hunch that not only would they see magic happening in those like human connections and human stories playing out, but I reckon their business would improve. Because in the world now where there is deep dissatisfaction around people just striving for profit, Mary Porter said herself that a business that is seen to be doing good in the world is also going to be seen to be doing well financially, because customers are seeking out, for sure, businesses that are authentically doing good. We're not talking greenwashing or box ticking. Businesses that authentically are trying to do good in the world. Yeah. Consumers, citizens, are seeking them out.
Yeah, yeah. And we're seeing that with the rise of the B Corp movements. And even when you were describing people who were going out of their way to come to the canvas its original days, it's because there's such a need there, because people are to...
Long after we'd closed, I went to the canvas to because the canvas on Hanbury Street was shuttered up for about a year and a half. So I could peer through it and see my space exactly as it had been on the 28th of July, just growing dust and the plants dying. And one day I was there, and this guy came up to me and he went, "Are you dealing with the canvas?" I said, "Yeah." He went, "I'm from Nottingham, but every time I come to London, I go to your cafe." It's like, it's never like where I'm going in London. I just take a detour to go to your cafe.
Wow.
So you're right.
Yeah.
People seek those places out,
yeah.
and I think they will increasingly seek them out.
Yes.
So what I'd like to do is I'd like to help cafes to add on those elements and then bring them together on some kind of platform where we can celebrate them and encourage them to gain greater customer loyalty, high street presence, and I think it will improve the bottom line of business of cafe owners. I haven't been able to prove it yet, but I'd like to find out.
Yes. And so if anyone's listening who perhaps is a cafe owner or who knows someone who is inspired by your vision and is thinking, I'm willing to give this a go, what might you want to say to them?
Well, definitely reach out. So the best way to get in touch with the Canvas is to go to Instagram, and we are at the Canvas for Change. And just drop me a DM. This chat is sort of the start, really, of what I'm creating over the summer and into the autumn of 2024, which is a podcast. So I'm going to be interviewing all the people who launched ideas at the Canvas, and that their ideas then went off to be powerful forces for good in the world. So I'll be interviewing Meg from Fat Macy's, Juliet from Happy Hour, Deepanshi from Rain on Me. But I'd also like to talk to people who are doing great work in this world of community building and people power, so that I can get inspiration and kind of learn. It's very much an exploration for me and a journey of learning. But every single episode, I'm going to be making a call out for cafe owners and people who live near cafes to go, come on then.
Yeah.
Come and get in touch.
Yeah.
Because if I can just be giving some really clear practical steps about how do you set up a pay it forward board, how does it work with your till, how to train your staff, how to set up a food bank, how to set up community events. What I'd like the second series of that podcast to be is going into those cafes and going, so hey, how's it working out for you? And start telling the stories of, the Canvas network and these incredible cafes who are trusting this concept and bringing it into their own spaces.
Yeah. And I know you said, you haven't got proof of concept yet, but you really have, because of the original Canvas and the story there. And I suppose what I'm hearing is that cafe owners can make it their own. It's not complicated. These are simple but really powerful tools that will invite in different kinds of people and really have a big impact.
Yeah, and I think they'll see. I think they'll see that their staff teams are more engaged and want to stay with them because of the good that they're doing. I'm really hoping that people come along for this journey. And I've got big thoughts about how, when let's say you've got this 100 spaces that are all behaving like a community asset, they're all doing these activities and they are connecting. Well, could we then create like network wide festivals? So you could have a summer of citizenship in 2025 where citizen-led events are happening, but then we promote the whole festival across our channels. I think it could be really amazing. And what I like about it is that it's people powered, and it's like when I said I was just dashing about, I got a marriage proposal from our bin man at the Canvas because I was putting the bins out every night of every day of every. And he's like, I see you all the time. So we got chatting, and one day he did propose. But like while
that is leadership right there. That is leadership.
While I was like busy running a cafe, humans were doing this amazing stuff. So I guess that's all I'm inviting. Like, come on, cafe owners, trust me to work with you on this, and I bet humans will do amazing things in your space. And I bet they'll love their space even more because it's doing these amazing things.
I'm prepared to be surprised.
Yeah.
It's so exciting, Ruth. I'm so excited for what's ahead. I'm so excited to listen to the other conversations that you're going to be having as part of the Campus podcast. It feels like there's anything that hasn't been said that you wanted to say.
I think there's one thing that is going to make me cry again, which is I would not have been able to do any of this without the support of my husband and my family. It's been very hard to hold on to to sort of what went well, when how it ended was just so shameful.
So
Brutal, thank you, because to me it felt shameful. So, for example, the first time I saw Ray, who had helped with Double Helpings, had a Zoom call maybe a year after it all closed, and I knew I was having the Zoom call with her because I could feel it. I could feel the anxiety, and her face came up, and she was like, Ruth, hello, and I burst into tears, and she said, what? And I went, I'm so sorry, and I feel this deep. I just want to say sorry, even if I'm not justified in saying it, to everyone who believed in the canvas and everyone who believed in me. I want to say sorry, even if you don't think I need to.
And can I say what I think people will say back to you?
Yeah.
Thank you so much for all that you poured into it, for your belief, for your asking, wouldn't it be wonderful if, at the very beginning, doing things you've never done before, staying the course when it was so hard, for the ripples of change that you might never even know about. I know that there'll be many people to say that. So that might be hard to let that in right now, but I'll say that in this moment.
I really appreciate that.
Because I wanted to ask, is there anything that you would love to say to yourself back then? If you could speak to yourself, perhaps 2 years ago, as that's happened, the journey is still so.
The Obstacle is the Way. It's the title of a really great book called The Obstacle is the Way. And I heard about it from a fantastic guy who I met randomly in a pub in Portsmouth. And I gave him sort of what had happened to me, and he just went, oh, wow, what a gift.
Mm-hmm.
The obstacle's the way. And it's true. It doesn't feel like it when you're in it. You feel like something's over, and it's awful, and you're grieving it, or in my case, struggling to grieve with it, for it. But now sitting here, going, wow, this could now mean that hundreds of cafes are transformed into community assets. Maybe if I hadn't have lost the cafe that I built and had the trio who sat around me and said, we are telling you to close Sydenham. Had I not had that stop, that enforced stop, I wouldn't have then had the idea to move into this next phase, which is to connect and unite existing cafes. And I'd have always been that stressed business owner trying to keep an independent cafe afloat, rather than what might now be something that's a much more impactful and helping far more people. But we have to go back to Brick Lane. Yes. There needs to be a cafe on Brick Lane that signs up to this.
There will be. Because
watch
this space.
We have to serve those customers again and rebuild that community.
So much, Ruth. I think everyone listening to this conversation along with me can hear your dedication, your passion, your vision and commitment, your humility as well in sharing this with so many people, not owning it, but saying this was ours. And just your real love for people. Thank you so much. for sharing it, for taking us on the journey. So excited.
Me too. Thank you so much, Emma. Well done. Oh, well done, you. You did it too. Thank you so much. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. The full podcast, The Canvas for Change, launches in September 2024. Like and subscribe to get the first episode sent straight to wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep the conversation going on Instagram at The Canvas for Change. Obviously, my burning question is, what's your secret celebrity crush?